Most people remember Whitman Mayo as the lovable junk dealer Grady Wilson from Sanford and Son. But what they don't know is the shocking truth about his final years. His once proud Atlanta home now sits abandoned, windows boarded up, hiding secrets that his family never wanted revealed. The man who made millions laugh died broke and forgotten. But why? From Atlanta streets to Hollywood dreams, the making of a comedy legend. Before Whitman Mayo became America's beloved Grady Wilson, he was just another kid from the South trying to make something of himself during one of the hardest times in American history. Born in New York City on November 1, 1923, Mayo's family moved to Atlanta when he was still young, searching for better opportunities in the growing southern city. The Great Depression hit the Mayo family hard, just like millions of other working-class families across the country. His father worked whatever jobs he could find to keep food on the table, while his mother took in laundry and cleaning work from wealthier Atlanta families. Young Whitman learned early that nothing came easy in life, and that lesson would stick with him forever. The family lived in a small house in one of Atlanta's black neighborhoods, where everyone knew everyone and people looked out for each other. After high school, Mayo didn't have the luxury of college dreams. Instead, he went straight to work as a teacher in the Atlanta public school system, earning barely enough to help support his family. But even then, something special set him apart. Students remembered him as the teacher who could make anyone laugh, even on the worst days. He had a natural gift for finding humor in everyday situations, turning ordinary moments into something memorable. When World War II called, Mayo served his country in the military, an experience that broadened his world beyond the Atlanta neighborhoods he knew. The service taught him discipline and gave him confidence, but it also showed him that there was a bigger world out there waiting for him. After returning home, he went back to teaching, but something had changed inside him. The turning point came when Mayo discovered the local theater scene in Atlanta during the 1950s. He started attending performances at small community theaters, watching in amazement as ordinary people transformed themselves into different characters on stage. Soon, he was volunteering backstage, then auditioning for small parts. His natural timing and ability to connect with audiences made him a standout performer, even in amateur productions. By the early 1960s, Mayo had caught the acting bug completely. Friends and fellow actors kept telling him the same thing. He had real talent that belonged in Hollywood. The decision to leave everything behind wasn't easy. He was giving up a steady teaching job, leaving his family, and heading to a city where thousands of hopeful actors arrived every year with the same dreams. But Mayo knew he had something special, and in 1964, he packed his belongings and bought a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. He had no idea that this leap of faith would eventually make him a household name, or that the journey would be much harder than he ever imagined. The Sanford and Son phenomenon, when Grady Wilson became America's favorite neighbor. The phone call that changed Whitman Mayo's life forever came in 1972, but it almost didn't happen at all. Mayo had been grinding it out in Hollywood for nearly 8 years, taking whatever small roles he could find just to pay rent on his tiny apartment. Then, casting directors for a new show called Sanford and Son saw something special in this soft-spoken man from Atlanta. They needed someone to play Grady Wilson, the well-meaning but bumbling neighbor to Red Fox's cantankerous Fred Sanford. What Mayo brought to Grady Wilson was pure magic. While Red Fox played the loud, scheming junk dealer, Mayo created a character who was gentle, loyal, and completely lovable. Grady was the kind of neighbor everyone wished they had, someone who would always try to help, even when he made things worse. The chemistry between Mayo and Fox was instant and electric, creating some of the funniest moments in television history. Sanford and Son became a cultural phenomenon almost overnight. By 1973, it was the second most-watched show on television, pulling in over 25 million viewers every week. Mayo's portrayal of Grady Wilson made him a household name, and suddenly, the struggling actor from Atlanta was earning more money than he had ever dreamed possible. His salary jumped to $25,000 per episode during the show's peak years, which was serious money in the 1970s. The syndication deals looked even better on paper. Mayo was promised a percentage of the show's future earnings, and everyone expected Sanford and Son to run forever in reruns. Conservative estimates suggested Mayo would earn millions over the coming decades. He was finally living the American dream, and it felt like nothing could go wrong. But Hollywood's success can be as fragile as it is rewarding. When Norman Lear and the network executives decided to give Mayo his own spin-off show in 1975, they called it simply Grady. The show followed his character as he moved in with his daughter's family in Los Angeles, bringing his good-hearted but disaster-prone personality to a new setting. Grady premiered with high expectations and decent ratings, but something was missing. Without Red Fox's explosive energy to play against, Mayo's gentle comedy style felt lost and unfocused. Behind the scenes, network executives were already having doubts. Some whispered that a black actor couldn't carry his own show without a stronger co-star, reflecting the ugly racial politics that still controlled much of Hollywood's decision-making. The show was canceled after just one season, lasting only 10 episodes. For Mayo, this wasn't just a professional disappointment. It was a devastating blow that marked the beginning of a downward spiral he would never fully recover from. Life at the peak, living large in the Georgia suburbs. When Whitman Mayo walked through the front door of his new Atlanta mansion in 1974, he couldn't help but think about that small house where he grew up during the Depression. This sprawling suburban home in one of Atlanta's most exclusive neighborhoods was everything he had dreamed about as a struggling teacher and starving actor. The two-story brick house sat on nearly 3 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, with enough space for the kind of life he never thought possible. The house itself was a testament to Mayo's success and his refined taste. 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms gave him plenty of space for family visits and overnight guests. The centerpiece was a massive living room with vaulted ceilings and a stone fireplace, where Mayo would later entertain some of the biggest names in Hollywood. A formal dining room could seat 12 people comfortably, and Mayo took special pride in the fully equipped bar area where he served his famous mint juleps to visitors. But it was the backyard that really showed Mayo's personality. The large swimming pool became the heart of legendary parties that brought together an unlikely mix of Hollywood celebrities, local Atlanta politicians, and neighborhood friends. Mayo insisted that everyone was welcome at his table, whether they were famous actors or the mailman who delivered to his street. He installed outdoor speakers throughout the yard and hired local musicians to play during his weekend gatherings. Mayo's generosity during these peak years became legendary in Atlanta's black community. He quietly donated thousands of dollars to local schools and youth programs, often showing up unannounced to hand out scholarships to promising young students. When aspiring black actors came to Atlanta looking for advice or connections, Mayo would invite them to stay in his guest rooms and spend hours sharing what he had learned about surviving in Hollywood. His driveway told its own story of success. Mayo owned a collection of luxury cars that he rotated depending on his mood, including a bright red Cadillac Eldorado and a sleek black Lincoln Continental. Neighbors would often see him washing and polishing these cars himself on Sunday mornings, never forgetting the value of hard work despite his newfound wealth. The house quickly became Atlanta's unofficial headquarters for visiting celebrities. When actors, musicians, or athletes came to town, they knew they could count on Mayo for authentic Southern hospitality. He took special pride in cooking elaborate meals himself, featuring traditional Georgia dishes that reminded his Hollywood friends why Southern cuisine was so special. Mayo's home represented more than just personal success. It was proof that a black actor could make it big in Hollywood and still maintain strong ties to his community and his roots. For several magical years, the house buzzed with laughter, music, and the kind of joy that comes from dreams fulfilled. But even in those golden days, Mayo had no idea how quickly everything could change. The warning signs, when the laughter stopped paying the bills. By the late 1970s, the phone calls that once brought Whitman Mayo exciting new opportunities had slowed to a trickle. After Sanford and Son ended its run and his spin-off Grady failed, Mayo found himself in the cruel reality that faces many television actors. He was famous enough that people recognized him on the street, but not famous enough that Hollywood was knocking down his door with new offers. The pilot season rejections came one after another. Mayo auditioned for countless new shows, but casting directors kept seeing him as Grady Wilson and nothing else. When he did land guest spots on shows like The Jeffersons or Good Times, the pay was a fraction of what he had earned during his Sanford and Son days. A single guest appearance might pay $3,000, barely enough to cover his monthly expenses on the Atlanta mansion. The syndication money that was supposed to secure his future became Mayo's first real lesson in Hollywood accounting. Legal changes in how residuals were calculated meant his percentage of Sanford and Son reruns was worth much less than originally promised. What he thought would be steady income for decades turned into irregular checks that grew smaller each year as newer shows pushed his classic episodes into less valuable time slots. Desperate to stay relevant, Mayo tried returning to his theater roots in the early 1980s. He invested his own money into touring productions, hoping to recapture the magic that had first drawn him to acting. But these ventures were disasters from the start. Poor management, bad booking agents, and venues that couldn't draw crowds meant Mayo was often paying more in expenses than he earned in ticket sales. Making matters worse, Mayo's health began to decline. Diabetes, diagnosed in 1983, required expensive medication and frequent doctor visits. The disease sapped his energy and made it harder to maintain the physical demands of live performance or long television shoots. Some days, he felt too weak to leave his Atlanta home, let alone travel to auditions in Los Angeles. The first missed mortgage payment came in 1985. A shocking wake-up call that Mayo tried to hide from everyone around him. Pride prevented him from reaching out to his former Sanford and Son co-stars, many of whom had gone on to bigger careers and healthier bank accounts. He convinced himself that things would turn around, that one good role would solve all his problems. Mayo began selling off his prized possessions quietly. The luxury cars disappeared from his driveway one by one, replaced by more practical vehicles. He stopped hosting the elaborate parties that had made his home famous, telling friends he was taking a break from entertaining. But behind closed doors, the bills were piling up, and the man who had once been television's most beloved neighbor was running out of options to save his dream home. Inside the abandoned Atlanta house, secrets behind the boarded windows. Today, if you drive down Cascade Road in southwest Atlanta, you'll find a haunting reminder of Whitman Mayo's rise and fall. The once magnificent brick mansion at 1247 Cascade Road sits like a ghost from another era. Its windows boarded up with plywood, and its sprawling yard choked with weeds that grow higher each year. What was once the crown jewel of the neighborhood has become its most troubling eyesore. The foreclosure happened in 1998, 3 years before Mayo's death, but the family was forced to leave most of their belongings behind. Neighbors who dared to peek through gaps in the boarded windows report seeing furniture still covered in white sheets, exactly as Mayo left them. The dining room table where celebrities once gathered for elaborate dinner parties, surrounded by chairs that haven't been moved in over 20 years. Local urban explorers who have managed to get inside tell even more disturbing stories. The master bedroom still contains Mayo's personal clothing hanging in the closets, as if he might return at any moment. Family photographs line the hallways, their glass frames cracked, but the images of happier times still visible. Most shocking of all, the kitchen cabinets still hold dishes and cookware, creating an eerie time capsule of interrupted life. The neighborhood has developed its own folklore around the abandoned house. Residents claim to see strange lights flickering in the upper windows late at night, even though the electricity was cut off decades ago. Some report hearing what sounds like laughter echoing from the empty rooms, particularly on weekend evenings when Mayo used to host his famous parties. Whether these stories are real, or just the imagination of people who remember better times, they add to the property's mysterious reputation. Vandalism and break-ins have taken their toll over the years. Graffiti covers parts of the exterior walls, and several windows have been smashed despite the wooden boards. The city of Atlanta has issued multiple notices threatening demolition, citing the property as a public safety hazard. Each time, last-minute legal interventions have saved the house, but its future remains uncertain. Perhaps the most intriguing discovery came from a maintenance worker who explored the basement in 2015. Hidden behind a false wall, he found what appeared to be Mayo's private memorabilia room. Stacks of Sanford and Son scripts, publicity photos, and even his original Grady Wilson costume were stored in plastic containers, carefully preserved, as if Mayo believed he might need them again someday. The basement also contained financial documents that told the tragic story of Mayo's final years, including unpaid bills and foreclosure notices that revealed just how desperate his situation had become. These silent witnesses to his decline remained hidden in the darkness, waiting to tell the full story of how America's favorite TV neighbor lost everything. The final financial collapse, from millionaire to Medicaid. The numbers tell a story that would shock anyone who remembered Whitman Mayo in his prime. At the height of his Sanford and Son fame in 1974, financial experts estimated Mayo's net worth at approximately $1.5 million, making him one of the wealthiest black actors of his generation. By the time of his death in 2001, that fortune had completely vanished, leaving him with less than $5,000 in total assets. The collapse wasn't sudden, but it was devastating in its completeness. Mayo's biggest mistake was trusting the wrong financial advisors in the 1980s. Convinced that real estate would always go up, he invested heavily in several Atlanta properties that turned into money pits. When the local market crashed in the early 1990s, Mayo found himself owing more on these properties than they were worth. His medical expenses became another crushing burden. Diabetes medication alone cost him over $800 per month, and his insurance coverage was spotty at best. Emergency room visits for diabetic complications could cost thousands of dollars each time, wiping out whatever small amounts he managed to earn from occasional acting work or fan convention appearances. The final blow came in 1998 when the bank foreclosed on his beloved Atlanta mansion. Mayo had fought for years to keep the house, taking out multiple loans and refinancing deals that only made his debt worse. When the sheriff's deputies arrived with eviction papers, Mayo was forced to leave behind most of his possessions and memories, moving into a cramped two-bedroom apartment that his sister helped him afford. His monthly income in those final years painted a heartbreaking picture of fallen celebrity. Social Security provided him with just over $900 per month, barely enough to cover rent and basic expenses. Occasional appearances at nostalgia conventions might bring in a few $100s, but these opportunities became rarer as Mayo's health declined, and younger generations forgot about Sanford and Son. Perhaps most painful of all was Mayo's application for Medicaid in 1999. The man who had once entertained Hollywood stars in his mansion was forced to prove to government caseworkers that he was poor enough to qualify for medical assistance. The application process required him to document the complete loss of his wealth, a humiliating reminder of how far he had fallen. Pride kept Mayo from reaching out to his former co-stars who might have helped. Red Fox had died in 1991, but other Sanford and Son actors had gone on to successful careers and comfortable retirements. Mayo couldn't bring himself to ask for handouts from people who remembered him as an equal, choosing instead to struggle alone in his small apartment. The financial records found in his abandoned house revealed the final tragic detail. At the time of his death, Mayo owed more in medical bills and back taxes than his entire estate was worth. The tragic final years and death, alone and forgotten. The last 3 years of Whitman Mayo's life were a cruel contrast to the laughter and joy he had brought to millions of television viewers. By 1998, diabetes had ravaged his body in ways that made simple daily tasks nearly impossible. His vision was failing, his legs were weak, and some days he couldn't summon the energy to leave his small apartment in southwest Atlanta. The apartment itself told the story of a man whose world had shrunk to almost nothing. Located in a modest complex on Campbellton Road, the two-bedroom unit was a far cry from the mansion he had lost to foreclosure. The living room contained a worn couch, a small television, and stacks of unpaid medical bills that seemed to multiply each week. The walls were bare except for a few framed photos from his Sanford and Son days, silent reminders of when life held promise and possibility. Mayo's health required constant medical attention that he could barely afford. Emergency trips to Grady Hospital became routine as his diabetes caused dangerous spikes and drops in his blood sugar. Each hospitalization weakened him further, and nurses noticed that he rarely had visitors during his stays. The man who had once hosted elaborate parties for dozens of friends was facing his health battles completely alone. His daily routine had become depressingly simple. Mayo would wake up around noon, take his medications if he could afford to fill the prescriptions, and spend most of the day watching television reruns. Neighbors occasionally saw him sitting on his small balcony, staring out at the parking lot with the distant expression of someone whose mind was elsewhere. The morning of May 22, 2001, started like any other for the 77-year-old actor, but sometime during that Tuesday, while alone in his apartment, Mayo suffered a massive heart attack. There was no one there to call for help, no family member to hold his hand, no friend to comfort him in his final moments. It wasn't until Friday that anyone realized something was wrong. A neighbor named Dorothy Williams became concerned when she hadn't seen Mayo for several days and noticed that his mail was piling up outside his door. When her knocks went unanswered, she called the apartment manager, who used a master key to enter the unit. They found Mayo's body in his bedroom, where he had apparently been trying to reach the telephone when the heart attack struck. The man who had made America laugh as the lovable Grady Wilson had died as he had lived his final years, completely alone and largely forgotten by the entertainment industry that had once celebrated him. The news of his death barely registered in the national media, with only the Atlanta Journal-Constitution running a brief obituary that most readers probably skipped over without recognition. Family grief and public reaction. A community says goodbye. When Mayo's sister received the phone call about her brother's death, her first emotion wasn't just grief, it was complete shock at how far he had fallen without asking for help. Family members knew he was struggling financially, but they had no idea the situation had become so desperate. The discovery that Mayo had less than $3,000 to his name meant the family faced an immediate crisis: how to pay for a funeral worthy of a man who had brought so much joy to others. Local Atlanta churches and community organizations stepped in where Hollywood had failed. The Macedonia Baptist Church, where Mayo had occasionally attended services, offered their sanctuary for the funeral service at no charge. Community members who remembered his generosity during better times donated money for flowers and other expenses, determined to give their former neighbor a dignified farewell. The funeral service, on May 28, 2001, painted a telling picture of how Mayo's world had shrunk in his final years. The small church was filled mostly with ordinary Atlanta residents, longtime neighbors, and a few local actors who had worked with Mayo in community theater productions. Notably absent were the Hollywood celebrities who had once enjoyed his hospitality at the mansion parties, highlighting the sad reality of how quickly the entertainment industry forgets its own. Word of Mayo's death traveled slowly through entertainment circles, often reaching people weeks after the funeral had already taken place. Many of his former Sanford and Son colleagues expressed genuine shock and regret, admitting they had lost touch with Mayo over the years and had no idea he was struggling so badly. Several mentioned feeling guilty that they hadn't made more effort to stay connected with their former co-star. The tribute articles that eventually appeared told a more complete story of Mayo's significance. Jet Magazine and Ebony both published remembrances that highlighted his role as one of television's first prominent black character actors who wasn't playing a stereotype. These articles reminded readers that Mayo had helped pave the way for future generations of black performers while maintaining dignity and humor in roles that could have easily become caricatures. Perhaps most importantly, Mayo's death sparked conversations within the black entertainment community about the treatment of aging performers. The Screen Actors Guild began discussing the need for better support systems for older actors, particularly those from minority backgrounds who often faced additional barriers in maintaining their careers as they aged. His story became a cautionary tale, whispered in Hollywood circles about the importance of financial planning and staying connected with colleagues. Industry organizations started creating programs specifically designed to help former television stars transition to life after their series ended, using Mayo's tragic example as motivation for change. The contrast between Mayo's lonely death and the genuine outpouring of community support for his funeral revealed both the worst and best of human nature, setting the stage for difficult questions about what his legacy would ultimately become. The house's dark legacy and Mayo's cautionary tale. What Grady Wilson's story teaches us about fame. More than 20 years after Whitman Mayo's death, His abandoned Atlanta mansion still stands as a haunting monument to both triumph and tragedy. In 2023, the city made another attempt to demolish the property, but local preservationists argued that the house represents an important piece of Atlanta's entertainment history. As of today, the fate of 1247 Cascade Road remains uncertain, caught between those who see it as a dangerous eyesore and others who view it as a reminder of lessons that shouldn't be forgotten. For the neighbors who remember Mayo's golden years, the boarded-up house serves as a daily reminder of how quickly success can vanish. Parents in the community often point to the property when teaching their children about the importance of saving money and making smart financial decisions. The mansion has become a local symbol of both what's possible when dreams come true and what can happen when those dreams aren't protected properly. Mayo's impact on television history cannot be measured by his financial struggles alone. As Grady Wilson, he helped normalize the presence of black actors in American living rooms during a time when such representation was rare and revolutionary. His gentle, dignified portrayal showed that black characters could be funny without being foolish, lovable without being servile. Comedic actors like Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, and Kevin Hart have all acknowledged the debt they owe to pioneers like Mayo, who proved that black performers could carry major television roles. The broader lessons from Mayo's story extend far beyond racial barriers in entertainment. His rise and fall illustrates the brutal reality that fame in America is often temporary, and that the entertainment industry provides little safety net for aging performers. Mayo's financial collapse happened because he trusted the wrong people, made poor investment choices, and lived as if his peak earnings would last forever. Perhaps most importantly, Mayo's story highlights the isolation that many former celebrities face as they age. The same industry that celebrated him during his Sanford and Son days offered little support when his health declined and his bank account emptied. His lonely death serves as a stark reminder that fame creates the illusion of friendship and security, but both can disappear as quickly as they arrived. Today's entertainers can learn from Mayo's mistakes by surrounding themselves with trustworthy financial advisors, diversifying their investments, and maintaining genuine relationships that aren't based solely on their celebrity status. His story also underscores the importance of health insurance and long-term care planning, especially for performers whose careers may not provide traditional retirement benefits. Whitman Mayo's legacy is complex and bittersweet. He will always be remembered as the man who brought Grady Wilson to life, creating moments of pure joy that still make people laugh decades later. But his tragic ending serves as a powerful warning about the price of fame and the importance of preparing for life after the spotlight fades.